Hi, Sterling Allen here of PESN. You join us for This Week in Free Energy, May 4th, 2014. We've had a lot of things going on. I keep pushing back the date for this weekly review. Lots of things going on. Hard to know where to take a breather and do a report. So excuse me as we just kind of throw in some stuff here and give you an update on the many things that are going on. The very most exciting thing is the solar hydrogen trends. We did an interview with them and got a report up, a video with images to go along with the audio interview that we did with them. Jacob Agagnon of, I'm sorry, I slaughtered that last name. He's the president of Solar Hydrogen Trends. Now, don't let that name get you to thinking that it's mainstream or blasé. That's anything but that. These guys are doing some phenomenal stuff, and it really has nothing to do with the sun being overhead. I don't know why they chose that name. I wouldn't have recommended it, but anyway, that's the name of their company. And their device is called the Symphony because it incorporates 16 different concurring principles at the same time. They've got electrolysis, they've got cavitation, cold fusion, electrolysis, all kinds of things going on at the same time in their system, producing copious amounts of hydrogen from water. Now, usually in electrolysis of water, you get gas out. If you separate it, hydrogen and oxygen, 2 parts hydrogen for 1 part oxygen. If you don't separate it out, you get Brown's gas. And the numbers, third-party validated on this technology, this is where we're getting the numbers on the efficiency of the system, input versus output, was done by a third-party agency in California. It's a highly credible organization. You go to their website, that's what they do is testing. I mean, that's what they've got their equipment to do, and that's what they get paid to do. They measured the DC current going in, around 400 to 600 watts, and they measured the gas coming out, both the quantitative, how much, and qualitative, what kind. And they showed that, now check out these numbers. You've got water on the input side, and 93.1% of the output gas that's coming out of the system is hydrogen. 2.75% is oxygen. There's something going on there. And the amount of gas coming out is basically the numbers that I ran on one of their columns, one of their tests, where they were producing the most gas. It was either 50 or 80 cubic feet per minute. You know, we're thousands of liters per minute kind of thing. And with just, I think that one was 700 watts going in. I measured the overunity to be 577 times overunity. So for the input power versus the output energy represented by the hydrogen gas, 577 times overunity. This is from third-party data. And so it's phenomenal stuff. We put them in #1 position in our top 5. One of the criteria for getting in the top 5 is not just having a good technology, but being close to market. Their prototype that they show, they call it Symphony 7, their 7th major prototype, 7th generation, so to speak, is basically a production prototype. There are a few modifications and improvements they don't want to make on that, but they're ready to go into production. They're looking for manufacturing money, to build a manufacturing plant and to start making these things to get them out there big time. And so if you are interested in licensing, investing, or financing this operation, give them a call. Really exciting stuff. And it'll probably be many months before you can start buying these things. And it's likely that somebody else is going to beat these guys to market and will push them out of #1 position in the top 5, but they're getting their moment of glory right now because of the amazing technology they have. And once these guys get up and running, it'll be hard to surpass what they're doing with the energy efficiency and the simplicity of their system. I mean, the device is not that complicated in terms of the size and the the components that go into it. Of course, a lot of it's proprietary, but just to look at it size-wise, the electrolysis system is like the size of 2 microwave ovens, producing that much gas. So that's phenomenal. And what I was getting at earlier about the oxygen, only 2.75% of the outgoing gas measured by this third-party entity is oxygen. I think 1% was nitrogen. But oxygen, the oxygen is probably turning into hydrogen. You've got 6 protons there in the oxygen that are somehow being liberated, fission, into individual atoms of hydrogen through their symphony of reactions, so you get this copious amount of hydrogen gas coming out. Another number that's interesting is 1 liter of water produces 1 kilogram of hydrogen. Normal electrolysis requires 9 liters of water to get 1 kilogram of hydrogen gas. So these guys are 1 liter to get the same amount of gas. And it's cheap. We're talking, something that would replace the gasoline in your engine would cost 25 cents for them to make. And you can convert a regular automobile engine to run on hydrogen. Ty Robinson over at AmericanFuelVehicles.com, a friend of mine, I went on a road trip with him several years ago to Atlanta and back in his Suburban that he converted to run on natural gas, hydrogen on the gaseous form, and ethanol on the liquid form. Went to Atlanta and back on those fuels, and I know it works. I rode in a car that ran it. I saw him fill it up. I know firsthand that this is very doable. And so we can convert our vehicles to run on hydrogen. And so this thing could be sitting in the back of your car. You replace your gas tank with a water tank, or replace the gas with water in your tank. And the amount of energy you get per gallon of water is actually quite a bit better as well. So you don't have as much weight in the gas or in your fuel. Your fuel is water in this case, but the energy is really coming from the other exotic stuff going on, whether it's cold fusion or cavitation or other things. I mean, they claim to be controlling particles. And so something like the Hadron Collider, this many billion-dollar project, they're doing with this small device, and so it's phenomenal stuff, really exciting. So anyone who has any bone of curiosity and interest as a scientist, I mean, they welcome you to come and test this thing if you're a qualified, interested party, that is interested in doing business. They're not looking for tire kickers and just curiosity people, but scientists, I would imagine they would invite scientists to come in who want to do dissertations or whatever on this technology. They would welcome that as well. They've got a prototype you can go in and test. They welcome that. They invite it. Because it's so exotic, people have a hard time with cognitive dissonance beating the path to the door because it's just so phenomenal. It's hard to believe. But they do have the data to support it by two third-party groups. Sign an NDA and you can get the whole skinny on that. But they do publish the first page of the one report and the name of the organization that did the report. So that's huge. Another big story, posted this one today finally. They've been trying to get me to get something up on this for quite a while. The YMNEE Resume over in where are they at? Bulgaria? It's not Ukraine. It might be Ukraine. Yeah, it's Ukraine. They're over in Ukraine. Their company headquarters are out of the UK, but most of the people are located in the Ukraine. A lot of good stuff coming from the Ukraine. There's another Resume that we'll be putting up. I haven't had time to build a page on it. What's the name of it? Let me just pull this up really quick. I've had a number of people saying, hey, you got to cover this. I'll get around to it. It's just got so many things going on, it's hard to keep on top of it all. Sorry, I can't find that link right away. But there is one also out of Ukraine, another Resume. But the YMNEE, these guys are basically say they're ready to go into production, and they're looking to build devices in the hundreds of kilowatts to megawatt region. They're looking for capital to build manufacturing facilities. And so basically, what we posted today is called the YMNEE Resume. That's spelled YMNEE. And basically, it's an executive summary, a brief report geared toward investors, potential partners. And so that's pretty exciting. And I went ahead and put them up into number 5 position in our top 5, just because we have enough people who are coming out with these Qmogens that, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's a lot of smoke on that one. We know of 51 different groups worldwide who have come up independent of one another, as far as we can tell, with these Qmogens. A smaller motor powering a larger generator, producing excess energy so that they can self-loop it back to power the motor and have excess energy left over to use. And this YMNEE, they're actually modifying the off-the-shelf components in a proprietary way, and they say there's going to be 50 patents when it's all said and done, when they're ready to start mass production. So they have filed 1 international patent so far. So anyway, that's a pretty big one. The reason that they're not, well, the reason that I put them in 5th position is because of how close they are to production. It would be nice if we actually had somebody cranking these things out, but we're getting closer. HCAT. This has been my world for the last many days. I have been immersed in HCAT, doing my own experimentation and calorimetry. On the HCAT, we did our second test on May 1st. Spent a couple of days kind of testing parameters, playing around with stuff, just seeing what we got. Got a new power supply from Hong Kong. It was a total lemon, total cheap. This thing started smoking when we turned it up. The terminal melted because they hadn't fastened the leads to it tightly. And so the knob actually melted down. We had to push it back up while it was still liquid or soft, and to hold it in place so it would come back kind of nominally in place. We couldn't get that thing. I mean, the first day we were able to get some results with it, but it just wasn't going to work for us. And the next morning we tried to run it, and it just wouldn't turn on. So we ended up using a battery charger, a 12-volt battery charger that Daryl had there at his place. And he also had a AC to AC rheostat, so he could control the power going to the battery charger. We had it on the 15 amp setting, and really it was ideal for the power level that we were looking at. I was very happy with it. I felt like we were in the voltage range that had been recommended. You don't want to go over 15 volts, you know, the current that you wanted, whatnot. It was perfect. And so, okay, where was I? We had a little interruption. I had to pause the recording. So we were talking about the power supply. We had a 12-volt battery power supply that we were using, and it was ideal. It worked just perfect. And ironically, we're sitting there waiting for this power supply to show up from Hong Kong. It was a total lemon, and ended up just, you know, we couldn't use it. So we came up with what he had there available, and it was perfect for what we were looking for. So we were producing about 1.5 liters a minute of gas. It was actually 1.50 we measured. At the end of the experiment, we just took the hose, put it into a liter or 2 liter bottle of water turned upside down in a 5-gallon bucket, put the nozzle there in the bottom, and counted the time that it took to fill the bottle with the gas to the 2 liter mark on the bottle, and that was the liter per minute reading. And that's a fairly accurate method of doing it. It's not, you know, it's not perfect metrology, but it's pretty good. So anyway, that's the rate of gas that we were using. And bottom line, I'm certain that we had excess heat going on. We measured 77% just with the base numbers of the DC current going in and the heating of the water, the beginning temperature versus the ending temperature over the period of time that we ran it. The period of time would be relevant to the watts in. The change in temperature represents the calories of water, calories of heat. And you can convert both of those to joules. You have output versus input, and that number was 77%. And that's not taking into consideration the heat that we can calculate from the cool down number. When we shut the thing off, we kept taking temperature readings all the way through the next day. Another 12 hours we took, or plus hours, we were taking temperature readings of the water. So we have a really good cool down curve. And from that data, you can figure out how much heat was lost to the environment. Also, you've got the heat of the weight. You have to have a weight to hold the catalytic converter underwater, otherwise it wants to float because it's full of air. And so we had a trailer hitch as a weight, and we'll have to tabulate the 2.25 pounds that represents of heat that was heated up in the process, and also the metal tub bin that also represents some energy. And last time that number came to 15% that we were able to add on top of the percentage that we had previously. And all you need is 64%. You need to exceed 64% to go beyond what modern science says would be possible in an ideal situation with electrolysis, which is 75% efficient, and catalysis, which is taking the Brown's gas back to water. Science would predict 85% efficiency at best. You multiply those two numbers together, you get 64%. So that's the best you could do in the system that we were using according to classical science. And so technically, overunity, or getting help from somewhere, anomalous heat, is anything above 64%. And so overunity in this situation is anything above 64%. We were at 77% just with the first number of the like I just mentioned. And so add 15% to that. And also another thing that was interesting this time is the temperature that Daryl, he got up at 2:30 in the morning to go out and take a temperature reading. And that number that he gave me the next morning was the same number that we had taken at the last reading at 9:30 or so at night. And so I don't know if that was from continued reaction with Brown's gas stuff going on in that setting, or if it was just from the heat that was inside the catalytic converter that's going to continue to dissipate into the water to heat it up even more. And so it was actually dropping down from a higher temperature. We didn't do really a good job of measuring the temperature immediately after. I went home, it was late, I was tired, I'd only gotten 3 hours of sleep the night before. So we didn't really get good data on immediately after, but we did get some good data on the cool down the next morning and then the next day. So when we do the numbers, we'll be able to check with the curve, make sure that his number at 2:30 in the morning does correspond with the numbers we got later on in the day. Last time it was a fairly straight curve. The cool down was it was almost a perfectly straight line. Of course, this time we went long enough that we actually got to the point where it was starting to plateau out because we were meeting ambient temperature, so the cool down rate was slowing quite a bit. Anyway, don't need to go into all the details. Another really interesting thing that we saw is that when you've got the Brown's gas thing going on, you've got the Brown's gas coming in on the front of the end of the catalytic converter, going across the catalytic matrix, and then it's taking the HHO gas back to water and liberating heat, and possibly doing some cold fusion or some other anomalous event, creating excess heat. And so the question is, what's coming out on the output side? We put a cap, an airtight cap on the back end with a hose coming from it, so we could dip it down into the water. You could see the bubbles coming out of it. So when we would first put the HHO gas up to this thing, the bubbles would come out at almost the same rate as the input bubbles. So you take the input hose, put it in, you do that liter per minute reading, see how much gas you're generating. You hook it up to the Brown's gas generator, you run it across there, and then you put the output into the water in the bath that's right below it. We don't have it in the water at this point because we want to bring it up to temperature before we put it in the water. This is the theory of how to improve the effect. And so you would see the bubble would start almost at the same rate as the input, and then as the catalytic reaction got, as the matrix got hotter, it would, and as I was holding this thing in my hand, and I did it, we did this several times, like 5 or 6 times, where we would heat it up. We put it in the tub so it was cooled down. It was ambient temperature. We bring it out of the tub, run the gas into it, so it started at ambient temperature, and it was actually nominally cool to the touch. It would feel cool, and then it would just feel kind of warm, and the output gas would start diminishing, and then it would stop. And at that point, the catalytic converter started getting really hot really fast. I mean, it's like, okay, we got to put this thing in the water because I'm not going to hold this anymore. I'm going to burn my hands. And then it would actually start sucking the water into the hose. It would actually create a vacuum effect on the output side. Even while gas is coming in at whatever the rate was at the time, you got gas coming in, and it was sucking air on the back end into the tube. And so we decided that's what we're going to do. We're going to get to that point, and then we'll start our reaction. And that was our proposal. Another thing we noticed, we were getting a lot of backflashes on the 30th as we were running the gas into there. We put it in the water, and it was, backflashing, boom, boom, boom. And you could see the red flame coming through the green tubing. It was really quite exciting. I thought I had a really good video of it. Turns out the camera wasn't turned on. But anyway, I also got a video. I thought I was taking a video of the balloon. We had a balloon on the output hose so that you could see, was it going to blow up? Is it going to inflate or deflate? And whenever it would backflash, it'd go, it would suck. It would like deflate at the same instant of the backflash. So you'd hear boom, and the balloon would suck. It would vacuum at the same time as the backflash going out the back end. So that was pretty cool. Also, when we ran our experiment, we started at 448, which is the same time we started the first test, ironically. The same time, 448. It was 446 that we, when we added, there was 446 was like the first number, and then I think our first measurement where we took the readings on the temperature was at 448. And then we ran it till about 9:30 or so. So we ran it, 5 hours, good 5 hours, and it was the gas. We had really good water, airtight. We were checking the airtightness by blowing into the hose while the apparatus was underwater to see if there were any bubbles coming out in the water, and no bubbles. We would move the hoses around to make sure, because as you're moving this thing up and down into the water, the angle of the hose and whatnot is being jarred, and but because the fitting on the plumber cap was really tight for the hose to go through, and then we had metal inside of that on the input side, that was moving around, but it would stay airtight because it was so tight. Same thing on the back end. He jerry-rigged like a plastic beverage bottle around. He took the plumber cap, cut the top off of it, and then he melted the beverage bottle around it so it came in tight. And then we put a clamp around that, a metal clamp, screwed it down tight. So, and then he had everything was airtight, and we were able to show that was the case. And then when we took it apart, you could see that, the way we put it together. Also, we took some videos and photos before the experiment so you could see our setup. And so when we were running this experiment for 5 hours, there was no gas produced on the back end. That we had a grocery bag, like you put your produce in, those are airtight, and we had a grocery bag sitting on there, completely sealed off with a rubber band. We broke a rubber band and went around really tight and tied a knot in it, and so it was secured airtight. It was flat when we started, and it was flat when we ended. There was no air coming out of the back end of that thing, no gas of any kind. We measured the it turns out this time we measured the water really carefully. Coming out, we were able to unscrew the cap at the end, pour the water out into a beaker, measure how much water was there. We measured, there was some, I actually ended up pouring the water into the bag that was at the bottom of the reservoir. I mean, not the reservoir, but at the bottom of the HCAT. So we emptied it from there. I exposed it out, and then we weighed the bag with the water, and we weighed a bag without any water on it. Took the difference. We also, the ceramic insulation at the top of the HCAT was quite wet from whatever, but it was almost sopping wet at some places. So we weighed that with water, and then we dried it out and weighed it without. The catalytic converter had water in it. We set that on the scale, weighed it, and then dried it out, weighed it again. It turns out that the water coming from the reservoir on the input side to make the gas and the water that ended up in the catalytic converter was the same. There wasn't any diminishing of that. At first it looked like it was going to be like half, but by the time we did all the calculations on all the different places where water could end up, it ended up being actually a little bit more, and our number was actually higher on the output than from the input. But that's just a function of the errors of the measurements and the margin of error that we're dealing with. And so with our apparatus, we weren't able to show any difference there this time. Last time we were showing that it was like 21% of the water ended up in the catalytic converter versus what was in the front end. But also last time we didn't do this thing where we first brought it up to temperature and then drop it in the bath, and then basically we were having to fight against that cool temperature, because when it's in the water bath, that water bath really sucks the energy out of there. We saw that in another number of experiments that we did on the 2 days prior to May 1st when we were doing the main test. And so there's obviously anyway, in that situation, probably a lot of the gas was escaping out the end and was not reacting into fuel. So the HHO gas being made by the generator was just venting out, wasn't being converted to energy. Ironically, the numbers that we got were in the same ballpark as the first time. So, whatever, we don't know all the parameters that are going on here, but I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. It was actually May 1st was Daryl's birthday, and he had some his grandkids came over for a little bit, and he took them out on called a magic carpet ride, where he takes his four-wheeler and he's got this big carpet that he pulls them around on the lawn. They just have all kinds of fun. He's got this little dip that they take them through, and they try and stay standing up while he's driving. It's a lot of fun. He's a great grandpa. So anyway, that was that. We also, I did a video of the, I went up to Steve, he runs greenfuelh2o.com, which is where we got our HHO generator. Went up there on Thursday morning on the 1st to get a couple more flashback arresters, because the day before we had a backflash that actually was so hot it caused the nipple from the backflash arrestor to come off, and flames started coming out the backflash arrestor. As the gas went past the hot rubber, it ignited the gas, and we had a flame. You blow it out and the flame would come out again because it would be ignited by the hot rubber. Finally we put it in, doused it in water. So we got a couple backflash arresters so that we, if we only had one left in the chain, we wanted to have that, protection. And so I went up to get that. And while I was there, I saw his lab. It's really not his lab, his shop, where he makes these things. And it's quite impressive. And so I took a video of that. We've got that up on the blog. We've got a blog page where we're, posting the things as we come up with the different data points and, measurements and theories. Speaking of theories, Professor Yoon Kim weighed in. He's the professor of physics at Purdue University. he was looking at the results that we were getting where you get this flashback and you get this vacuum effect. And he talked about how that ties into the Bose-Einstein constant state nuclear fusion, or boson cluster state nuclear fusion as it's called. And he describes that. He gives a link to a paper that he wrote about that. And we're also going to send him a sample of our water, both from the reservoir and from the catalyzer that ended up in the catalytic converter, so he can measure for the existence of sulfur. Because if there's sulfur in there, then that validates his theory that one of the reasons you have excess heat in these scenarios is oxygen is fusing to sulfur. And so he'll be measuring for sulfur in the catalytic converter. We cut off a little corner off the matrix. We're going to send one to him and one to Stephen E. Jones, a professor formerly from BYU. He's one of the pioneers of the cold fusion industry, as many of you know. Send him a sample to test as well. And also I just ordered today a copy, or a sulfur tester. It's $14 online, where you just basically, it's like a litmus test for pH. Just run a little piece of paper in there and see what color it turns up. You match it to a chart and you can see what level, from 0 to whatever is in the sample. So we'll be able to test it ourselves. So we'll keep some of the water ourselves, and that will be interesting if we see that. And then also, we had another report we got up last week. I mentioned that we did some numbers and ran some data, some additional tests on our meters, because there was a question about, well, I was using this meter that I borrowed from an electrician around here that is always dealing with AC current. DC is not his field. He's not installing solar panels and things like that. He's dealing with conventional electricity. So he doesn't have a DC probe to hook onto his meter. And so we were using an AC probe in an AC setting, and we were measuring DC current. And I was able to show that by going to something which is a known entity, a battery charger, and showing that the level of current going to the battery at different settings, and to show that it tracked along with my dad's clamp-on amp meter, which is a DC meter by TPI. And also we had the meter on the battery charger itself was corresponding, and they were tracking up and down together. So they were moving, they were in the same range, and they were moving with the same magnitude, to show that meter does indeed measure, it can measure DC. But it turns out that that's a function of, it's going to be basically dependent on your power supply, your battery charger in this case, and it's, it has to do with how they're engineered, and a pulse that goes on there, and it's not something that you can calibrate. Say, well, we measure DC voltage on or current on this system, therefore we can measure DC current on this system. It's going to have to be calibrated on the system that you're using. So that was still left in question, but we did show that indeed we were measuring DC current, and we can calibrate it to a certain extent with the data of the Faraday equation that you put in the amount of voltage you're using and the liters per minute that you're producing, and you're able to come up with the current. And so Steve ran those numbers, and that actually dropped our number down quite a bit from what our numbers had been. But it was still in the region of being over unity, of being above the 64% number that I was talking about. And so, that's what has spurred me on. That's why we did this follow-up study. And also, we did a report this week about the heat loss accounting improves the efficiency numbers in our first HCAT experiment. It boosted it by, with the non-perfect insulation was 57,000 calories. The steel tub was 1,300 calories. The half brick was 1,250 calories, and that pushes up the anomalous heat by 15%. So anyway, that's the HCAT. Been having lots of fun, and stay tuned on our blog for the HCAT about that. That's linked up on our homepage. And moving on, other news. We finally got a link up to the interview that Mike Waters, who's the president of the New Energy Systems Trust, which we founded 2 years ago on May 1st. May 1st was the anniversary, the 2-year anniversary of that founding. And Mike Waters is now the acting president. We voted him in January. He gave a phenomenal presentation at the Global Breakthrough Energy Movement Conference in Boulder in October of last year. And we posted, embedded that video so you can watch it. A great individual. He gave an excellent presentation. You gotta love his dry British humor, and the brilliance that he represents. Morocco, the QEG, they achieved resonance. That doesn't mean overunity. It just means resonance is basically an important step in getting to overunity. We don't know of any tests that have been run yet to weigh input versus output to show that the output is more than the input by whatever factor. As far as I know, there has not been any significant testing that has been done along those lines. And more and more this is looking like it's deep in research and development, certainly not ready for you to download the plans, build one of these things and power your house with this 10 kilowatt system. The wattage that is producing this high current, or high voltage, low current, super high voltage, and high frequency, and so it's there's a lot of to get the right insulation on your coils and your stack, and all that kind of stuff, so it doesn't arc. Because if you get arcing, you have to basically take it apart, start all over again. So this is deep in research and development. They're not ready to basically say, here's how it works, print this out, make these plans and build it and power your house. They're not there yet. Off topic, we posted a video to this email that was going around viral. A pilot forgets to turn off chemtrails while landing. Turns out that that's a natural phenomena. The reduction in pressure and temperature across each vortex can cause water to condense, make the cores of the wingtip vortices visible as the plane's landing. There's a expose video that shows normal situations where these crafts, this happens in moist circumstances, high humidity. If the conditions are right, you see this kind of thing. It looks like chemtrails, but it's not. It's just a natural phenomena. And that pretty much wraps it up for this week in free energy. I am going to be doing a report on this Najendra Singh with the announced this week. He actually put an ad in the local paper for his gravity motor technology. I think he's getting ahead of himself. He's not as far along as he's making it sound in his ad. But we'll be doing a report on that, encouraging him to continue. So that's it for this week in free energy. Join us again next week. Thank you for watching. Interview that we did with them, Jacob Agagnon of, I'm sorry, I slaughtered that last name. He's the president of Solar Hydrogen Trends. Now, don't let that name get you to thinking that it's mainstream or blasé. That's anything but that. These guys are doing some phenomenal stuff, and it really has nothing to do with the sun being overhead. I don't know why they chose that name. I wouldn't have recommended it, but anyway, that's the name of their company. And their device is called the Symphony because it incorporates 16 different concurring principles at the same time. They've got electrolysis, they've got cavitation, cold fusion, electrolysis, all kinds of things going on at the same time in their system, producing copious amounts of hydrogen from water. Now, usually in electrolysis of water, you get gas out. If you separate it, hydrogen and oxygen, 2 parts hydrogen for 1 part oxygen. If you don't separate it out, you get Brown's gas. And the numbers, third-party validated on this technology, this is where we're getting the numbers on the efficiency of the system, input versus output, was done by a third-party agency in California. It's highly credible organization. You go to their website, that's what they do is testing. I mean, that's what they've got their equipment to do, and that's what they get paid to do. They measured the DC current going in around 400 to 600 watts, and they measured the gas coming out, both the quantitative, how much, and qualitative. Hi, Sterling Allen here of PESN. You join us for This Week in Free Energy, May 4th, 2014. We've had a lot of things going on. I keep pushing back the date for this weekly review. Lots of things going on. Hard to know where to take a breather and do a report. So excuse me as we just kind of throw in some stuff here and give you an update on the many things that are going on. The very most exciting thing is the solar hydrogen trends. We did an interview with them and got a report up, a video with images to go along with the audio interview versus the output energy represented by the hydrogen gas, 577 times over unity. This is from third-party data. And so it is phenomenal stuff. We put them in #1 position in our top 5. One of the criteria for getting in the top 5 is not just having a good technology, but being close to market. Their prototype that they show, they call it Symphony 7, their 7th major prototype, 7th generation, so to speak, is basically a production prototype. There are a few modifications and improvements they don't want to make on that, but they're ready to go into production. They're looking for manufacturing money, to build a manufacturing plant and to start making these things to get them out there big time. And so, what kind? And they showed that, now check out these numbers. You've got water on the input side, and 93.1% of the output gas that's coming out of the system is hydrogen. 2.75% is oxygen. There's something going on there. And the amount of gas coming out is basically the numbers that I ran on one of their columns, one of their tests, where they were producing the most gas. It was either 50 or 80 cubic feet per minute. You know, we're thousands of liters per minute kind of thing. And with just, I think that one was 700 watts going in. I measured the over unity to be 577 times over unity. So for the input power,